So here's the collar all completed on the stand. So now is a good time to kind of have a really good look at it. Make sure that where your fold is here and the raw edge of the back of the stand size, make sure that that's 5/8 of an inch, the difference here. If you've got a discrepancy, maybe a little more, maybe a little bit less, then you can take this seam here that you folded back and you can adjust it. You've trimmed it to 3/8, so you can pull it back a little bit and repress, or pull it up a little. You want to get this right before you sew this onto your shirt. So I've got the shirt here, and I've taken the back and I've sewn the back at the shoulder seams here to the front. So with right sides together, sewn my shoulder. You can see I've serged this. You can serge it, you can do a French seam. Just make sure that you're only taking up 5/8 of an inch in total for your seam here. Press the seams all to the back, okay? So your seam allowance that you've sewn at the shoulders is pressed towards the back. And I've pressed this side as well as this side. Make sure this is a nice crisp crease. So the other thing you notice on here is I've done a row of stay stitching. So stay stitching is just sort of a stabilizing row. So it's there so that I keep this curve from overstretching. I also have it so that I can clip this curve, because if you take a look at your collar, you see that that's a straight line, and that straight line is going to get sewn onto this curved edge. So we want to make it so that this curve opens up nicely. So I'm going to clip this, and I'm going to clip it. Let me just move that. I'm going to clip it starting in the curve. I don't usually clip the very front where the placket is. So I'm going to clip down to the stitching, because my stitching is at approximately 1/2 inch. My 5/8 of an inch seam allowance is going to be a little bit beyond this. So if I stitch these two on properly, you shouldn't see any of this stitching. If you do, you can always take it out after. But you want to make sure that you clip down and not through that row of stitching. And just clip in the curved areas. So across the center back, it's not as curved. And I'll show you where I've marked the center back as well. So I'm just clipping this. So now you see that that curved edge now will straighten out and make it a lot easier to pin and sew this collar onto it. Okay. Now I've also taken and marked my center back. That marking was not on your pattern. So you're going to line up your placket edges. Actually, line up your shoulder seams. That's more going to give you the exact center back. So line up those shoulder seams, and then just take a little clip and mark it. I've marked it center back. I've also done the same on my collar. I've lined up those curved edges, and I've taken that straight edge, folded it in half, and I've marked with just a little notch the center back. So now I have my right side up. I can now take my collar on top. I can pin this in place. Find some pins. So I'm going to pin that first. The next pin I want to put in is I want to line up that edge at the front, and I want to show you what I want it to look like. So I'm lining up this edge along the front of the collar placket. So what happens is when that gets sewn, that curve should just continue right down the placket. If you'd been using the same fabric for a collar, you wouldn't even notice, but you see that curve just goes straight down the placket. And that's really important. You don't want to pin it so that maybe what happens is you can see here. So now I've got part of this collar sticking out, and when I tuck all this in, there's a little bit of a jut here. So you don't want that. You want that to be pinned right on the edge. And you see how I've kept the seam allowance folded back. So I'm not opening up this seam allowance at all in the collar stand. I'm leaving it folded back where it's been stitched to. So I've got a pin here. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I'm going to pin this here and just flip it up, do a little check. So now what I have to do is I want to pin my collar, the stand of my collar, to the neckline. So I'm just going to put a few pins in, and because this is a curved edge, you're going to have to pull some of it up. You may have to put a few more clips in. Don't worry about that. If you need to put a few more clips, and you're going to go along and you're going to do both sides, and then you're going to take it to the sewing machine and you're going to sew at 5/8 of an inch. You're going to make sure that these edges, this is a place where it's okay to have a lot of pins. You may need to have several in there, and you want to make sure that that collar, that neckline of the shirt stays nice and flat, that you don't end up with any tucks or pleats in it. If you do, after you've stitched it, you can always go back and pick out and kind of ease it in, but it should all fit nicely. This looks like it's going to fit in here really nice. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew. Now, I like to sew with my stand facing up. You may find you want to be able to see what's going on with this collar here. You may want to have the neckline facing up. I guess it's just a personal preference. For me, I like this up. I've put enough pins in the back here that and along the collar, and I've checked and everything looks okay. So I'm not worried about it pleating, and I feel like I'll have more control if I sew from this way. So you can try this. If it doesn't work, use a longer stitch, so you're not, if you have to pick it out, you've got a little bit of, it's not so difficult to pick out. But you know, test it, try it both ways, see which way works. Okay, we're going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to show you how to sew this.